Rachel and Elliot, a young couple living in the bustling city of Brooksville, were overjoyed when they welcomed their beautiful baby boy, Luke, into the world. Their hearts overflowed with love for their precious son as they vowed to provide him with the best life possible. However, as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the demands of their careers began to take a toll on Rachel and Elliot. They found themselves trapped in a cycle of long work hours, endless deadlines, and mounting financial pressures. The once vibrant and loving couple began to drift apart, their dreams overshadowed by the harsh realities of city life. Rachel, a talented artist, had always dreamed of pursuing her passion and sharing her creativity with the world. Elliot, a dedicated lawyer, had aspirations of making a difference in the lives of others through his work. But in their pursuit for success, they had lost sight of what truly mattered: their family. Feeling overwhelmed, Rachel and Elliot made the difficult decision to entrust Luke's care to Rachel's mother, Grandma Clara. As they made the tough decision to entrust Luke's care to Grandma Clara, a sense of both relief and guilt washed over them. They knew it was the best choice for their son, but the thought of being apart from him was heart-wrenching. Grandma Clara, a warm and loving woman, lived in a picturesque town nestled amidst rolling hills and lush forests. Her cosy cottage exuded a sense of comfort and tranquility, the perfect environment for Luke to grow and thrive. As Rachel and Elliot bid their tearful goodbyes, they knew that Grandma Clara would provide their son with all the love and attention he deserved. Luke, initially confused and sad about the sudden change, soon found solace in Grandma Clara's gentle embrace. She showered him with affection, soothing his worries and creating a nurturing space where he felt safe and loved. Together they explored the wonders of nature, went on magical adventures, and shared heartfelt interactions. Meanwhile, Rachel and Elliot, though physically separated from their son, remained a constant presence in his life. They made regular trips to visit Luke, cherishing every precious moment they spent together. One evening, as Luke took his first tentative steps, Rachel and Elliot watched with a mix of pride and regret. They realized that they had missed so many precious moments in their son's life, consumed by the relentless demands of their careers. It was a wake-up call that shook them to their core. Back in the bustling city, Rachel and Elliot toiled tirelessly to provide for their family. Their conversations often revolved around Luke, their voices tinged with longing and regret for the time they couldn't spend with him. "I wish we could be there for Luke's soccer games," Rachel lamented one evening, exhaustion etched in the lines of her face. Elliot nodded, his expression pained. "I know, but we have to work to give him the best future we can." Their hearts heavy with guilt, Rachel and Elliot found solace in the occasional video call with Luke, where they showered him with love and promises of visits that never seemed to materialize. Meanwhile, in Grandma Clara's cozy home, Luke laughed and played, his days filled with simple joys and boundless love. Grandma Clara, having witnessed her grandson's transformation from a scared and overwhelmed child to a confident and joyful young boy, realized the depth of the responsibility entrusted to her. She embraced her role with unwavering dedication, understanding that she was not just Luke's caretaker, but also his guiding light. He often spoke of his parents, their faces captured in faded photographs that adorned the walls of his grandmother's house. "They love you very much, you know," Grandma Clara reassured him one evening as they sat by the fireplace, the crackling flames casting a warm glow over the room. Luke nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I know, Grandma, and I love them too, even if they can't be here with us. In the quaint town, Luke thrived in the close-knit community. The townspeople embraced him as their own, recognizing his kind heart and infectious enthusiasm. Luke's days were filled with laughter as he made friends, participated in community events, and discovered hidden treasures in the surrounding nature. With Grandma Clara as his guardian, he thrived in the small town where everyone knew each other by name. Each morning, Luke would wake to the sound of birdsong filtering through his bedroom window. After a hearty breakfast of pancakes and maple syrup, lovingly prepared by Grandma Clara, Luke would grab his backpack and set off on his daily adventures. His first stop was always the town square, where he'd meet with his best friend, Julia. Julia was a lively girl with bright blue eyes and a contagious laugh. Together they would explore the winding streets of the town, their imaginations running wild as they played games of make-believe and searched for hidden treasures. "Luke, look what I found!" Julia would exclaim, holding up a shiny pebble or a colourful feather she'd discovered along the way. Luke would grin, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Whoa, that's amazing! Let's add it to our collection." As they roamed the town, Luke would greet familiar faces with a friendly wave and a bright smile. There was Mr. Andrew, the kindly old man who tended to his garden with loving care, and Mrs. Hart, the baker, who always saved them a freshly baked cookie from her shop. "Good morning, Luke," Mr. Andrew would call out, his wrinkled face breaking into a warm smile. "Off on another adventure, I see." Luke would nod enthusiastically. "Yes, sir. Julia and I exploring the woods today." Mrs. Hart would chuckle fondly. "Oh, well, be sure to come by later for a treat, dear. I'll have something special waiting for you." With promises of sweets dancing in their heads, Luke and Julia would venture into the dense forest that bordered the town, their laughter echoing through the trees as they chased after imaginary creatures and built forts out of fallen branches. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Luke would return home to Grandma Clara's warm embrace, his heart full of memories made and adventures shared. "Did you have a good day, sweetheart?" Grandma Clara would ask, her eyes twinkling with love and pride. Luke would nod, a contented smile spread across his face. "The best, Grandma. I can't wait to do it all again tomorrow." Under the sprawling canopy of the old oak tree, Luke found his favourite spot to climb and daydream. With nimble feet and a heart full of curiosity, he would ascend to the highest branches, feeling the cool breeze ruffle his hair as he gazed out over the rolling hills that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Oh, be careful up there, Luke," Grandma Clara would call from below, her voice carrying a hint of concern. "Don't worry, Grandma, I've got this," Luke would reply, his grin wide as he reached for the next branch. From her seat beneath the tree, Grandma Clara would watch her grandson with a mixture of pride and trepidation, her weathered hands busy knitting a warm scarf. "You remind me so much of your mother when she was your age," she would muse, a wistful smile playing on her lips. Luke would pause in his climbing, curiosity piqued. "Grandma, what was she like?" "Oh, she was just as adventurous as you are, always exploring and getting into mischief." Grandma Clara would chuckle, her eyes sparkling with memories of days gone by. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Luke and Grandma Clara would sit by the crackling fire, the warmth enveloping them like a comforting embrace. "Tell me a story, Grandma," Luke would plead, his eyes wide with anticipation. and Grandma Clara would oblige, spinning tales of far-off lands and daring escapades, her voice soft and soothing against the backdrop of the night. As they sat together beneath the starlit sky, Luke knew in his heart that he was exactly where he was meant to be, surrounded by love and guided by the wisdom of his beloved grandmother. And in that moment, the distance between him and his parents seemed to fade away, replaced by the warmth of a bond that transcended time and space. When Luke turned 12, his parents, Rachel and Elliot, decided it was time to bring him back to the city for a better education and exposure to opportunities they believed he couldn't find in the small town. Excitement and uncertainty mingled in the air as they prepared for the move, packing boxes and making arrangements to uproot their lives once more. "Luke, sweetheart, this is going to be such an exciting adventure for us," Rachel would say, her voice filled with forced enthusiasm as she attempted to mask her apprehensions.
"Yeah, buddy, you're going to love the city. There are so many new things to see and do,"
Elliot would chime in, his smile strained as he tried to reassure his son. But for Luke, the prospect of leaving behind the only home he'd ever known filled him with a sense of unease. As he watched Grandma Clara packing his belongings into cardboard boxes, tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. "I don't want to leave, Grandma," he would whisper, his voice trembling with emotion. Grandma Clara would pull him into a tight embrace, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know, my dear, but sometimes change is necessary for growth, and no matter where you go, you'll always carry a piece of this town with you in your heart." Reluctantly, Luke bid farewell to the familiar streets and friendly faces of his childhood, his heart heavy with the weight of uncertainty. As they drove away from the small town, his gaze lingered on the receding landscape, a lump forming in his throat as he struggled to come to terms with the new chapter unfolding before him. In the city, amidst the towering skyscrapers and bustling crowds, Luke found himself adrift in a sea of unfamiliar faces and unfamiliar places. Despite his parents' best efforts to make him feel at home, he couldn't shake the feeling of displacement that gnawed at him from within. "I miss Grandma Clara," he would confide to his parents, his voice tinged with longing. "I miss the trees and the fields and the quiet of the town." Rachel and Elliot would exchange uneasy glances, their guilt weighing heavily upon them as they grappled with the realization that they had uprooted their son from the only home he'd ever known, without fully considering the impact it would have on him. "We're sorry, Luke. We thought this would be the best thing for you," Rachel would say, her voice laced with regret.
"We just want what's best for you, buddy. We promise things will get better,"
Elliot would add, his tone tinged with uncertainty. But for Luke, the city would never be the same as his home. Despite the opportunities it offered, he couldn't help but yearn for the simplicity and warmth of the town he'd left behind. And as he lay awake at night, listening to the distant hum of traffic outside his window, he silently vowed to find a way back to the place he truly belonged. In the city, Rachel and Elliot's lives were consumed by the relentless demands of their careers. From the moment they woke to the blare of their alarm clocks, to the late hours of the night when they finally collapsed into bed, their days were a blur of endless meetings, deadlines, and stress. Each morning they would rush through their morning routines, barely exchanging more than a hurried greeting as they grabbed their coffees and headed out of the door. The city streets buzzed with activity as they navigated the crowded sidewalks and honking traffic, lost in their thoughts and worries. At the office, Rachel and Elliot would bury themselves in their work, their days stretching into long hours spent hunched over glowing computer screens, their mind consumed by endless tasks and emails. Lunch breaks were a luxury they could scarcely afford, and even then they would often find themselves wolfing down takeout at their desks, the taste of hurried meals leaving a bitter aftertaste in their mouths. By the time evening rolled around, Rachel and Elliot would stagger home, bone-weary and drained, their exhaustion etched in the lines of their faces. The conversation was a rarity as they collapsed into the couch, their bodies craving nothing more than the blissful oblivion of sleep. "Another long day," Rachel would mumble, her voice barely above a whisper as she closed her eyes, her head lolling against the cushions. Elliot would nod, his eyelids drooping with fatigue. "Yeah, maybe tomorrow will be better." Their free time was a precious commodity, but even then, they would often found themselves too drained to do much more than collapse into bed or mindlessly scroll through their phones. The thought of cooking a meal seemed like an insurmountable task, and so they would opt for the convenience of ordering takeout, their plates piled high with greasy fast food and their stomachs left unsatisfied. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Rachel and Elliot's lives became a monotonous cycle of work and sleep, their dreams and desires buried beneath the weight of the responsibilities. And amidst the hustle and bustle of the city, the bond that once held them together seemed to fade into the background, a distant memory of a life they could no longer remember. The relentless grind of city life had taken its toll on Rachel and Elliot, casting a shadow over the vibrancy and passion that once defined them. Their spirits, once bright and lively, had dulled like a fading ember, smothered beneath the weight of their daily routines and responsibilities. Gone were the days of spontaneous adventures and laughter-filled evenings spent with friends. Instead, their lives had become a predictable rhythm of work, sleep, and fleeting moments of numbness. Weekends, once a beacon of hope amid the chaos, had become little more than extensions of the work week, filled with half-hearted attempts at relaxation that only served to highlight the emptiness of their existence. Their once vibrant personalities had been replaced by a sense of apathy and indifference, their conversations devoid of passion and excitement. Even when they attempted to reconnect, their interactions felt stilted and forced, as if they were merely going through the motions of a life they no longer recognized. "I feel like we're just going through the motions," Rachel would sigh, her voice heavy with resignation. Elliot would nod in agreement, his eyes clouded with a sense of longing. "I miss the days when we used to laugh and have fun together." But trying as they might to recapture the spark that had once ignited their relationship, Rachel and Elliot found themselves trapped in a cycle of monotony, their dreams and aspirations buried beneath the weight of their obligations. Their once thriving social lives had dwindled to almost nothing, replaced by solitary evenings spent in front of the television or lost in the depths of their thoughts. The vibrant energy of the city that had once drawn them in now felt suffocating, its bright lights and bustling streets serving as a constant reminder of the life they had lost. And so Rachel and Elliot trudged through their days, their hearts heavy with the weight of unfulfilled dreams and shattered expectations. In a city that never slept, they found themselves drifting further and further apart. Two ships passing in the night, lost in the vast expanse of urban anonymity. For Luke, the transition from the idyllic countryside of his small town to the monotonous cityscape was a jarring contrast that left him feeling adrift in a sea of concrete and glass. Gone were the lush green fields and towering trees that had once been his playground, replaced by towering skyscrapers and crowded streets that seemed to swallow him whole. Each morning as he woke to the sound of honking horns and distant sirens, Luke couldn't help but yearn for the peaceful serenity of his grandmother's home. The air in the city was thick with the scent of exhaust and industry, a far cry from the crisp, clean air that had filled his lungs back in his town.
"I miss the sound of birdsong in the morning," Luke would murmur to himself, his voice tinged with longing as he gazed out the window at the sea of concrete that stretched out before him. In Rockville, his grandma's hometown, his days had been filled with endless adventures and discoveries, from climbing trees to exploring hidden trails in the woods. But in the city, his world had shrunk to the confines of their cramped apartment in the crowded streets below. "I miss the freedom of running through the fields," Luke would confess to his parents, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I miss the smell of fresh grass and the feel of the wind in my hair."
But trying as he might to adapt to his new surroundings, Luke couldn't shake the feeling of displacement that gnawed at him from within. In Rockville, he had been surrounded by friends and familiar faces, his days filled with laughter and companionship, but in the city, he felt isolated and alone, a stranger in a strange land.
"I don't belong here,"
Luke would whisper to himself, his voice barely above a whisper as he curled up in his bed, the sounds of the city echoing outside his window. As he drifted off to sleep, his dreams filled with memories of a life left behind, Luke couldn't help but wonder if he would ever find his place in this vast and impersonal city. Rachel and Elliot's initial excitement at having Luke join them in the city was palpable. They eagerly anticipated the opportunity to reconnect with their son and create new memories together. But as the days turned into weeks, their enthusiasm waned, replaced by the relentless demands of their busy lives. In the beginning, they made an effort to spend time with Luke, taking him out to explore the city and introducing him to new experiences, but as work obligations piled up and deadlines loomed, their interactions with their son became increasingly sporadic. "Luke, we're so glad you're here with us," Rachel would say, her smile strained as she hurriedly packed Luke's lunch before rushing out the door. Elliot would nod in agreement, his eyes already glued to his phone as he scrolled through emails.
"Oh yeah, buddy, we're going to have so much fun together."
As the days passed, Luke found himself spending more and more time alone in their apartment. His only company was the silence that filled the empty rooms. School was no better, as he struggled to navigate the unfamiliar hallways and cliques of his new classmates. Each day he would trudge home from school, his footsteps heavy with loneliness as he unlocked the door to their apartment. The smell of packed food would greet him as he entered, a stark reminder of the absence of his parents.
"Another day, another meal alone,"
Luke would mutter to himself, his voice tinged with bitterness as he sat down at the kitchen table to eat. With no friends to talk to, and no one to share his thoughts and feelings with, Luke found himself retreating further and further into himself, his once vibrant spirit dimming with each passing day.
"I miss Grandma Clara,"
he would whisper to himself, his eyes welling up with tears as he stared out the window at the bustling city below. And so, his days fell into a monotonous routine of school and solitude, his heart heavy with the weight of loneliness and longing. In a city filled with millions of people, Luke felt more alone than ever, a lost soul adrift in a sea of anonymity. In the quaint town of Rockville, Grandma Clara's cosy home felt emptier than ever in the absence of her beloved grandson, Luke. The echoes of their laughter and the pitter-patter of his footsteps seemed to linger in the air, a constant reminder of the void left behind by his departure. Each morning as Grandma Clara went about her daily routines, the absence of Luke's cheerful presence weighed heavily on her heart. She missed their morning walks through the fields, hand in hand, as they chased after butterflies and shared secret whispers in the gentle breeze. "Oh, Luke, how I miss our talks," Grandma Clara would murmur to herself, her voice tinged with longing as she sat in her favourite armchair, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. The memories of their conversations filled her thoughts like a balm, each word and shared moment of precious treasure to be cherished. From tales of his adventures in Rockville to the dreams and aspirations he held close to his heart, Luke had been her confidant and companion, her source of joy and inspiration. "I miss hearing about your day, sweetheart," Grandma Clara would say softly, her voice carrying across the empty room as if hoping to reach his ears. "I miss our talks about everything under the sun." As she moved through the familiar rooms of her home, Grandma Clara couldn't help but feel a pang of loneliness at the absence of Luke's presence. The toys and books that once littered the living room now sat, untouched, silent witnesses to the passage of time and the ache of separation. "I miss our activities together," Grandma Clara would sigh, her eyes misting over with tears as she glanced at the empty swing in the backyard. "I miss baking cookies and watching movies, just the two of us." And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Grandma Clara found herself counting down the moments until she could wrap her arms around her grandson once more, longing for the day when they would be reunited and the echoes of their laughter would once again fill her home with warmth and joy. As the days stretched on, Luke's sense of isolation and longing for the comfort of his grandmother's home grew stronger with each passing moment. The bustling city felt more suffocating than ever, its towering skyscrapers closing in around him like walls of glass and steel. One evening, as Rachel and Elliot returned home to find Luke sitting alone at the kitchen table, his expression drawn and his eyes distant, they could sense that something was amiss. "Luke, is everything okay?" Rachel asked, her voice laced with concern as she approached her son. Luke hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with conflicting emotions, but then with a sense of determination that surprised even himself. He blurted out the words that had been weighing heavily on his heart. "I want to go to stay with Grandma Clara," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't belong here. I miss her and I miss Rockville. Please, Mum, Dad, I want to go home." His parents exchanged uneasy glances, their guilt and frustration bubbling to the surface. For Rachel and Elliot, Luke's sudden outburst was a stark reminder of their shortcomings as parents, their inability to provide him with the love and stability he so desperately craved. "Luke, we're doing what we think is best for you," Elliot said, his voice tinged with frustration. "You can't just run away from your problems." Rachel nodded in agreement, her expression hardened by the weight of their burdens. "We're your parents, Luke. You need to listen to us." But for Luke, their words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the overwhelming sense of longing and discontent that consumed him from within. In a fit of frustration and anger, he pushed his chair back from the table and stormed out of the room, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the empty apartment. As Rachel and Elliot watched their son disappear down the hallway, a sense of helplessness washed over them like a tidal wave, and in that moment they realized that their actions had only served to push Luke further away, driving a wedge between them that seemed impossible to mend. As they stood alone in the silence of their empty apartment, the weight of their own mistakes hung heavy in the air, a bitter reminder of the cost of their neglect. Despite the initial tension and reluctance, Luke's plea to have Grandma Clara visit during the holidays proved to be a turning point for the family. Rachel and Elliot, realizing the depth of their son's longing for his grandmother's presence, reluctantly agreed to extend the invitation, hoping that her visit would bring some semblance of joy and normalcy to their strained relationship. "Luke, your grandma will be here soon. Let's try to make the most of her visit," Rachel would say, her voice tinged with forced cheerfulness, and as she busied herself with preparation for Grandma Clara's arrival. Luke nodded in agreement, a sense of anticipation building within him as he counted down the days until he could once again be reunited with his beloved grandmother. He longed for the familiar comfort of her embrace,
the sound of her laughter echoing through the halls of their home like music to his ears. And when Grandma Clara finally arrived, her presence brought with it a sense of warmth and joy that had been sorely lacking in their lives. Luke's face lit up with delight as he greeted her at the door, enveloping her in a tight hug that spoke volumes of his love and affection. "Grandma, I've missed you so much," he would exclaim, his voice filled with genuine happiness as he led her into the living room. Grandma Clara would smile, her eyes twinkling with warmth as she returned his embrace. "And I've missed you too, sweetheart. Oh, it's good to be home." For the duration of her visit, Luke revealed the simple pleasures of spending time with his grandmother, from baking cookies together in the kitchen to taking long walks in the park hand in hand. Each moment was a precious treasure to be cherished, a respite from the loneliness and isolation that had plagued him in her absence. Meanwhile, Rachel and Elliot did their best to maintain a facade of normalcy, masking their insecurities and frustrations behind smiles and polite conversation. They watched with bittersweet hearts as Luke and Grandma Clara laughed and played, their bond stronger than ever in the face of adversity. "We're so glad you're here, Mum," Rachel would say, her voice thick with emotion as she hugged her mother tightly. Elliot would nod in agreement, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Yes, it's good to have you with us, even if it's just for a little while." As they gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories and laughter late into the night, Luke couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the love and support of his family, imperfect though they may be. In the presence of his grandmother, he found solace and reassurance, a reminder that no matter how apart they may be, the bonds of family would always hold them together. Grandma Clara's visits were like a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds for Luke. Her presence brought with it a sense of warmth and comfort that enveloped him like a protective embrace, banishing the shadows of loneliness that had lingered in the corners of his heart. From the moment she arrived, Luke felt a weight lift from his shoulders, as if a heavy burden had lifted from his soul. The sound of her laughter and the gentle touch of her hand filled him with a sense of belonging and security that he had sorely missed in her absence. "Grandma, I'm so glad you're here," Luke would say, his voice filled with genuine happiness as he hugged her tightly. Grandma Clara would smile, her eyes sparkling with love and affection. "And I'm glad to be here, sweetheart. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Together, they would embark on new adventures and create lasting memories, from exploring the city streets to sharing quiet moments of reflection in the park. With Grandma Clara by his side, Luke felt a renewed sense of purpose and joy, as if the world had suddenly become a brighter and more hopeful place. "Thank you for coming, Grandma," Luke would say, his voice tinged with gratitude as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Grandma Clara would squeeze his hand, her smile filled with love. "Any time, sweetheart. You know I'll always be here for you no matter what." As they sat together in the fading light, the warmth of Grandma Clara's laugh surrounding them like a protective cocoon, Luke couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over him. In her presence he found solace and strength, a reminder that no matter how dark the days may seem, the love of family would always light the way. Soon, the strain of Rachel and Elliot's demanding jobs and mounting financial pressures began to take its toll on their relationship. What had once been occasional arguments over minor disagreements escalated into full-blown shouting matches, leaving Luke feeling like a helpless bystander caught in the crossfire of their crumbling marriage. The tension in the air was palpable, thick and suffocating, as Rachel and Elliot's voices grew louder and more heated with each passing day. Their once loving gazes were replaced by icy glares and clenched jaws, their frustration and resentment boiling over like a pot ready to burst.
You never listen to me, Rachel would accuse, her voice filled with anger and frustration as she faced off against her husband. Elliot's response would be equally venomous.
And you never support me. All you care about is yourself.
Their arguments would echo through the walls of their apartment, sending shivers down Luke's spine as he huddled in his room, the sound of their fighting seeping into his bones like a chill wind on a winter's night. He could hear the sounds of doors slamming and objects crashing to the ground, each noise a painful reminder of the chaos that had overtaken their once peaceful home. Despite their best efforts to shield him from their conflicts, Luke couldn't help but feel the weight of their struggles bearing down on him like a heavy burden. The fear and uncertainty that gnawed at his heart threatened to consume him whole, leaving him feeling lost and alone in a world that seemed to be falling apart at the seams. As he listened to the echoes of their arguments fading into the night, Luke couldn't help but wonder if there would ever be a way to mend the rift that had formed between his parents, if the love that had once bound them together could ever be restored. But for now, all he could do was hold on to hope and pray for a reprieve from the storm that raged outside his door. As the evening shadows lengthened and the city lights flickered to life, a sense of dread settled over Luke like a heavy blanket. He could hear the clinking of glasses and the murmur of voices from the living room, signalling the beginning of another night filled with tension and turmoil.
"Luke, why don't you go to your room and do your homework?" Rachel's strained voice would call out in an attempt to shield her son from the chaos that was about to unfold.
Luke would nod silently, his heart sinking with the weight of unspoken words and unshed tears. He knew all too well what would come next, the bitter taste of alcohol and anger lingering in the air like a storm on the horizon. But as the night wore on and the drinks flowed freely, Rachel and Elliot's composure would begin to crumble, their voices rising in anger and frustration. Luke could hear the sound of slamming doors and shattered glass, the echoes of their arguments reverberating through the walls of their home like a nightmare come to life.
"Enough!" Rachel's voice would ring out, her words laced with fury as she confronted her husband. Elliot would respond with a bitter laugh, his anger boiling over. "Huh, you think you can control me? You're just as messed up as I am."
And as their voices reached a crescendo, Luke would huddle in his room, his hands covering his ears in a futile attempt to block out the sounds of their fighting. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he silently prayed for the nightmare to end, for the love and warmth of Grandma Clara's embrace to wash away the pain and fear that consumed him. But despite his best efforts to pretend otherwise, Luke couldn't escape the harsh reality of his parents' struggles. Their fights and arguments became a nightly ritual, a terrifying reminder of the fragile facade of normalcy that they clung to in the face of their demons. As he lay in bed, listening to the sounds of his parents' voices growing fainter and fainter, Luke couldn't help but wonder if things would ever get better. If the love and happiness he so desperately craved would ever find its way back into their lives. But for now, all he could do was hold on to hope and pray for a brighter tomorrow. One fateful evening, as Rachel and Elliot's voices reached a crescendo, their argument escalating to a fever pitch, Luke could no longer stand idly by, watching the turmoil unfold. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, he emerged from his room, determined to put an end to the chaos that had consumed their home.
"Mum, Dad, please stop fighting,"
Luke pleaded, his voice quivering with emotion as he stepped between them, his arms outstretched in a desperate attempt to diffuse the tension, but his words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the intensity of their anger and frustration. Rachel and Elliot's gazes locked into fierce battles of wills, their voices rising to a deafening roar as they continued to hurl accusations and insults at each other.
"Luke, stay out of this!" Rachel snapped, her eyes flashing with anger as she pushed him aside, her voice cutting like a knife through the air.
Elliot's response was no less harsh.
"This is none of your business, Luke. Go back to your room and leave us alone."
Tears welled up in Luke's eyes as he stumbled backward, the weight of their rejection crushing him like a ton of bricks. He felt a sense of helplessness wash over him, a suffocating wave of despair that threatened to drown him in its wake.
"I just want to be a family again," Luke whispered, his voice barely above a whisper as he turned and fled back to the safety of his room, the echoes of his parents' fighting ringing in his ears like a haunting melody. Alone in the darkness, Luke buried his face in his hands, the tears flowing freely as he grappled with the harsh reality of their fractured family. In that moment he felt more alone than ever, a lost soul adrift in a sea of turmoil and uncertainty. As he lay in bed, his heart heavy with sorrow, Luke couldn't help but wonder if there would ever be a way to mend the rift that had torn them apart, if the love that had once bound them together could ever be restored. But for now all he could do was pray for a reprieve from the storm that raged outside his door, a glimmer of hope in the darkness that threatened to consume him whole. One particularly tumultuous evening, tensions in the household reached a boiling point as Rachel and Elliot's arguments spiraled out of control. Luke, unable to bear the chaos any longer, stepped in, his voice trembling with fear and desperation. "Please, Mum, Dad, stop fighting," Luke pleaded, his eyes wide with anguish as he tried to intercede. But his words only seemed to add fuel to the fire as Rachel and Elliot's voices rose to a deafening crescendo, their anger escalating with each passing moment. Luke could feel the tension crackling in the air like electricity, a sense of impending doom hanging over them all. In a fit of frustration and rage, Elliot's hand lashed out, striking Luke on the arm with a force that left him reeling in pain. Tears welled up in Luke's eyes as he stumbled backward, the sting of his father's blow echoing through his bones like a thunderclap. "Dad, please," Luke whimpered, his voice trembling with hurt and betrayal as he clutched his injured arms. But Elliot, consumed by his anger and frustration, seemed oblivious to his son's pain, his gaze locked into a fierce battle of wills with Rachel. As their argument raged on, Luke felt a sense of isolation and despair wash over him, a helpless bystander caught in the crossfire of their volatile emotions. As the night wore on and the echoes of their fighting continued to reverberate through the walls of their home, Luke found himself seeking solace in his mother's arms, hoping for comfort and reassurance amid the chaos. But to his dismay, Rachel, overwhelmed by her frustrations and insecurities, retreated in the safety of her room, leaving Luke to tend to his injuries alone. "Mum, I'm hurt," Luke would call out, his voice tinged with desperation as he stood outside her closed door, the tears streaming down his cheeks. But there was no response, no comforting embrace to soothe his wounded soul. As he nursed his bruised arm in the solitude of his room, Luke couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal gnawing at his heart, a bitter reminder of the fractured family that he longed to mend. The cycle of arguments and violence within Luke's household became a dark cloud that hung over him every waking moment. Each confrontation between Rachel and Elliot left him feeling more helpless and alone than before, his sense of safety and security shattered by the constant turmoil that plagued their home. The memory of his father's blow lingered like a scar on Luke's psyche, a painful reminder of the fragility of his family and the betrayal of trust that had torn them apart. Nightmares haunted his sleep, the echoes of their fights reverberating through his dreams like a never-ending nightmare. "I just want things to go back to the way they were," Luke would whisper to himself, his voice filled with longing and despair as he curled up in bed, seeking refuge from the chaos that raged outside his door. But no matter how hard he tried to block out the noise, the sounds of their arguments would seep into his consciousness like a poison, filling him with a sense of dread and apprehension that refused to be silenced. With each passing day, Luke's sense of devastation and trauma deepened, leaving him feeling like a shadow of his former self. The once bright light that had burnt within him had been extinguished, replaced by a darkness that seemed to envelop him from within. "I can't do this anymore," Luke would whisper to himself, his voice choked with tears as he struggled to make sense of the pain and confusion that consumed him. But amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope remained, a glimmer of light that refused to be extinguished. Deep down, Luke knew that he was stronger than the darkness that threatened to consume him, that he had the power to rise above the chaos and find his way back to the light. As he clung to that glimmer of hope, a newfound sense of determination filled his heart, a resolve to break free from the cycle of violence and despair that had held him so captive for so long. With each passing day he vowed to fight for a better future, not just for himself, but for the family that he still dared to hope could be saved. "Who could that be?" Rachel murmured, her brow furrowed with confusion as she made her way to the door. Elliot shrugged, his expression equally puzzled as he followed her, his heart pounding with apprehension. But as Rachel swung open the door, their confusion turned to shock as they found themselves face to face with a familiar figure standing on their doorstep. "Mum?" Rachel gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief as she took in the sight of her mother standing before her. Grandma Clara smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief as she swept into the apartment with all the grace and elegance of a queen returning to her throne. "Surprise!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with laughter as she enveloped Rachel and Elliot in a warm embrace. Luke, who had been lingering in the background, his heart filled with a mixture of shock and joy at the sight of his beloved grandmother, rushed forward to join them, his arms outstretched in a desperate attempt to capture the moment. "Grandma! What are you doing here?" Luke exclaimed, his voice filled with wonder and excitement as he hugged her tightly. Grandma Clara chuckled, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she ruffled his hair affectionately. "I couldn't stay away any longer, sweetheart. I missed you too much." As they settled into the familiar comforts of their home, Rachel and Elliot did their best to put a facade of normalcy, masking their inner turmoil behind smiles and polite conversation. They exchanged uneasy glances when Grandma Clara wasn't looking, a silent acknowledgement of the fragile balance they were trying to maintain. But despite their best efforts, the cracks in their facade were beginning to show, the weight of their secrets and insecurities threatening to break through at any moment. As they sat around the dinner table, sharing stories and laughter late into the night, Luke couldn't help but wonder if their family would ever find the peace and happiness they so desperately craved. But for now, all he could do was revel in the warmth and love of his grandmother's embrace, a beacon of hope in the darkness that threatened to engulf them all. And as he drifted off to sleep that night, his heart filled with gratitude and longing, Luke couldn't help but pray for a brighter tomorrow where the echoes of their laughter would drown out the whispers of their fears. That evening, as Clara tucked Luke into bed, he clung to her tightly, his voice trembling with fear. "Please, Grandma, take me away from him. I'm very scared," he pleaded, his eyes filled with tears. Clara's heart sank as he saw the genuine terror in her grandson's eyes. Clara's heart shattered into a million pieces as she felt the tremble in Luke's embrace and heard the desperation in his voice. She held him close, her own eyes brimming with tears at the raw fear emanating from her beloved grandson. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Clara asked, her voice gentle but laced with concern as she brushed a stray tear from Luke's cheek. Luke's words tumbled out in a rush, his voice choked with emotion as he pulled out his fears and frustrations. He spoke of the arguments and fights that filled their home, of the harsh words and bitter accusations that left him feeling lost and alone in a sea of chaos. "Please, take me with you, Grandma," Luke whispered, his voice barely above a whisper as he clung to her tightly as if she were the only anchor keeping him from being swept away by the storm. Clara's heart broke anew with each word that fell from Luke's lips, her mind racing as she struggled to comprehend the depths of his pain and suffering. She had known that things hadn't been easy for him since coming to the city, but she never had imagined that he was living in such fear and turmoil. "Oh, my darling boy," Clara murmured, her voice thick with emotion as she held Luke close, her arms a shield against the darkness that threatened to engulf him. "I am so sorry you're going through this. You don't have to be scared anymore. I'm here now, and I'll do everything in my power to protect you. But even as Clara spoke the words, a sense of helplessness washed over her like a tidal wave. She didn't know how to fix the brokenness that had taken root in her family, how to shield Luke from the pain and trauma that had become an all too familiar presence in their lives. As she tucked Luke into bed and kissed him goodnight, Clara couldn't shake the feeling of despair that clung to her like a shadow. She knew that she couldn't magically make everything better for her grandson, couldn't erase the scars that had already been carved into his young heart. But she promised herself at that moment that she would do everything in her power to bring light and love back into Luke's life, to be the steadfast anchor that he so desperately needed during the storm. And as she whispered a silent prayer for strength and guidance, Clara vowed to never let her grandson face his fears alone again. With a heavy heart and a sense of determination, Grandma Clara decided to confront Rachel and Elliot about Luke's distress. She couldn't bear to see her grandson suffer any longer, and she refused to let their denial stand in the way of addressing the truth.
"Rachel, Elliot, we need to talk," Clara began, her voice firm but tinged with concern as she sat them down in the living room. Rachel and Elliot exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions guarded as they braced themselves for what was to come. They could sense the seriousness in Clara's tone and knew that they couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. "Luke told me about the arguments and fighting that have been happening," Clara continued, her gaze unwavering as she met Rachel and Elliot's eyes. "He's scared. He needs our help." But Rachel and Elliot's response was immediate and dismissive. "Luke is exaggerating," Rachel insisted, her voice laced with frustration. "We're just going through a rough patch, but we'll work it out." Elliot nodded in agreement, his tone equally defensive. "There's nothing to worry about, Clara," he said, his voice tinged with irritation. "We've got everything under control." Clara's heart sank as she listened to Rachel and Elliot's dismissive response, their words like a dagger to her soul. She had hoped that they would be open to discussing the challenges they were facing as a family, and that they would acknowledge the pain and suffering that Luke had endured. "But Luke seemed genuinely scared," Clara insisted, her voice tinged with frustration and disbelief as she met Rachel and Elliot's gazes. "He wouldn't make up stories like that. He needs our help." Rachel and Elliot exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions guarded as they bristled at Clara's words. "Luke is just a child," Rachel countered, her voice tight with defensiveness. "He doesn't understand what's going on. He's probably just homesick for Rockville." Elliot nodded in agreement, his tone equally dismissive. "We're doing the best we can for him," he insisted. "He just needs to give us a chance." But Clara could see through the facade they were trying to maintain and could sense the fear and uncertainty lurking beneath their carefully crafted mask of normacy. She knew that they were struggling, that the cracks in their marriage ran deeper than they were willing to admit. Her words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the weight of their insecurities and fears. As Rachel and Elliot turned away, retreating into the safety of their denial, Clara felt a sense of helplessness wash over her like a tidal wave. At that moment, she realized that she couldn't force them to confront the truth, couldn't make them see the pain and suffering that their son was enduring. All she could do was be there for Luke, to offer him the love and support that he so desperately needed in the face of their indifference. As she held her grandson close, her heart heavy with sorrow and regret, Clara vowed to never stop fighting for the happiness and well-being of her family, no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem. She may not have been able to break through their defences this time, but she refused to give up hope. She would continue to fight for her family, to be the unwavering source of love and support that Luke so desperately needed in the face of their indifference. With a heavy heart and a sense of urgency, Grandma Clara took matters into her own hands. She couldn't bear to see Luke suffer any longer, and she knew that she needed to uncover the truth in order to protect him from further harm. In the quiet of the night, Clara discreetly installed a hidden camera in Luke's room, carefully positioned it to capture any signs of the turmoil that plagued their household. It was a desperate measure, one born out of love and concern for her grandson, but Clara knew that she couldn't stand idly by while he continued to suffer in silence. Later, as he watched the live feed from the hidden camera, Clara's heart clenched with fear and apprehension. She held her breath, her eyes scanning the screen for any clues that might reveal the source of Luke's distress. And then, as she watched in horror, the truth was laid bare before her eyes. The camera captured Rachel and Elliot's heated arguments, their voices filled with anger and frustration as they hurled insults and accusations at each other. Clara's hands trembled with emotion as she witnessed the pain and fear etched on Luke's face, his eyes wide with terror as he cowered in the corner of his room, a silent witness to the chaos unfolding before him. Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks as she realised the extent of her grandson's suffering, the depth of the betrayal that had torn their family apart. But amidst the pain and despair, a sense of determination burnt bright within her heart. Armed with the evidence she had uncovered, Clara knew that it was time to confront Rachel and Elliot once and for all. She would not rest until justice was served, until Luke was safe from the turmoil that threatened to consume him. As she wiped away her tears and prepared to face the storm that awaited her, Clara vowed to never stop fighting for her grandson's happiness and well-being, no matter the cost. For Luke, she would move mountains and nothing would stand in her way. With resolve burning in her heart, Clara waited for the right moment to confront Rachel and Elliot. When the time was ripe, she called for a family meeting, her demeanour firm but filled with love and concern for Luke. "Rachel, Elliot, we need to talk," Clara began, her voice steady as she faced them, the hidden camera footage serving as a silent witness to the truth she was about to reveal. As she presented the evidence of their arguments and the impact it had on Luke, Rachel and Elliot's expression morphed from surprise to defensiveness. Anger flickered in their eyes, but Clara stood her ground, unwavering in her determination to protect her grandson. "How dare you invade our privacy like this?" Rachel exclaimed, her voice rising with indignation as she glared at Clara. "You had no right to spy on us!" Elliot's jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "This is outrageous," he growled, his voice tinged with frustration. "You have no idea what we're going through." But Clara refused to be swayed by their protests, her gaze unwavering as she met their accusations head-on. "I did what I had to do to protect Luke," she insisted, her voice firm but filled with compassion. "He's been living in fear because of your actions, and I won't stand by and let it continue." However, Rachel and Elliot were blinded by their anger, unwilling to acknowledge the harm they had caused to their son. Instead of accepting responsibility for their actions, they lashed out at Clara, their words like daggers aimed at her heart. "You have no idea what we're going through," Rachel snapped, her voice tinged with bitterness as she glared at Clara. "You think you know everything, but you don't have a clue." Elliot's expression hardened, his gaze icy as he levelled an accusatory stare at Clara. "You think you're so righteous, but you're just sticking your nose where it doesn't belong," he retorted, his voice dripping with disdain. Clara felt a wave of sadness wash over her at their refusal to see reason, at their stubborn insistence on deflecting blame instead of facing the truth, but she refused to be deterred, her love for Luke giving her strength to stand firm in the face of their hostility. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," Clara said, her voice tinged with sadness. "I just want what's best for Luke. And if you can't see that, then maybe you need to take a long, hard look at yourselves and ask why." With that, Clara turned and left the room, her heart heavy with sorrow but filled with resolve. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she refused to give up on her grandson. For Luke's sake, she would continue to fight, no matter the cost. Fueled by a fierce determination to save Luke from further harm, Clara wasted no time in seeking legal advice and reporting the abuse to the authorities. With a heavy heart but a resolute spirit, she knew that taking this step was necessary to protect her grandson from the turmoil that had engulfed their family. As news of the case spread, it quickly gained attention and a team of child protection services were assigned to investigate the claims. Clara cooperated fully with the authorities, providing them with the evidence she had gathered and recounting Luke's experiences with heartbreaking clarity. Rachel and Elliot were blindsided by Clara's actions, their fury and disbelief rising to the surface as they realized the gravity of the situation. They felt betrayed by Clara's decision to expose their dark secret, their minds reeling with fear at the prospect of the consequences that awaited them. "How could you do this to us?" Rachel's voice trembled with anger and hurt as she confronted Clara, her eyes brimming with tears of frustration. "You had no right to interfere in our family like this." Elliot's expression hardened, his jaw clenched with barely contained rage. "You've crossed a line, Clara," he growled, his voice thick with resentment. "We trusted you and you've betrayed us." But Clara remained steadfast in the face of their accusations, her resolve unshakable as she stood firm in her belief that Luke's safety was paramount. She refused to be swayed by their attempts to discredit her, knowing that the truth would prevail in the end. As the investigation unfolded, Rachel and Elliot's attempts to undermine Clara's credibility only served to strengthen the case against them. The evidence was damning, and it wasn't long before the authorities took decisive action to remove Luke from the toxic environment. Despite their anger and resentment towards Clara, Rachel and Elliot couldn't deny the gravity of the situation. Deep down, they knew that their actions had caused irreparable harm to their son, and they were forced to confront the harsh reality of their shortcomings as parents. For Clara, the most important thing was that Luke was finally safe, and though the road ahead would be difficult, she was filled with hope for a brighter future, where Luke could finally find the peace and happiness he so deserved. As the legal battle unfolded, Clara emerged as Luke's fiercest advocate, standing by his side every step of the way. With unwavering determination, she fought tirelessly to ensure that her grandson's voice would not be silenced, and that his suffering would not be in vain. Clara worked closely with Luke's legal team, providing them with invaluable insights into his experiences and emotions. She attended every court hearing, her presence a symbol of unwavering support and love for her grandson. In the solemn courtroom, Clara found herself facing a heartbreaking reality as her own family, once bound by love and kinship, now stood on opposite sides of the legal battle. Rachel and Elliot, Luke's parents, were now the defendants, accused for the very crimes Clara had fought so tirelessly to expose. As the proceedings unfolded, Clara's heart ached with a mixture of sadness and disbelief. She couldn't help but feel a pang of betrayal as she watched Rachel and Elliot attempt to defend their actions, their words a stark contrast to the truth they knew all too well. But Clara refused to be swayed by their attempts to deflect blame and minimize their responsibility. With unwavering resolve, she stood before the court as a beacon of strength and determination, her eyes locked on Luke's as she silently vowed to fight for justice on his behalf. Despite the emotional turmoil raging within her, Clara remained composed and focused, her unwavering commitment to Luke's well-being guiding her every action. She knew that the truth would prevail in the end, and she was determined to ensure that Luke received the justice he deserved. As the evidence against Rachel and Elliot mounted, Clara's faith in the legal system was reaffirmed. The truth could not be denied, and it wasn't long before the jury reached their verdict: guilty on all counts of abuse and negligence towards a child. Despite facing immense pressure and scrutiny, Clara remained steadfast in her mission to ensure that Luke received the justice he deserved, and as the legal proceedings reached their conclusions, her efforts were rewarded with a landmark victory that sent shockwaves through the community. At that moment, Clara felt a sense of bittersweet relief wash over her. While the outcome of the trial brought a measure of closure to their ordeal, it also served as a painful reminder of their shattered family bonds that could never be fully repaired. But amidst the sorrow and regret, Clara found solace in the knowledge that her unwavering love and determination had not only saved Luke from further harm, but had also brought justice to the innocent, and as she embraced her grandson in a silent celebration of their victory, Clara knew that their journey was far from over, But with love and resilience lighting their way, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead together as a family. As she looked into Luke's eyes and saw the glimmer of hope and resilience shining within them, Clara felt a profound sense of pride and gratitude. Together they had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever before. And as they embraced each other in a silent celebration of their triumph, Clara knew that their journey was far from over, but with love and determination lighting their way, she was confident that they would overcome whatever obstacles lay ahead, together, as a family. With the courts ruling in favour of Luke's safety and well-being, Grandma Clara was granted legal custody of her beloved grandson. It was a moment of both relief and joy as Luke happily embraced the opportunity to live with his grandmother, knowing he was finally free from the turmoil that had haunted him for so long. Under Grandma Clara's loving care, Luke found solace and stability, his days filled with warmth and laughter instead of fear and uncertainty. Together they embarked on a new chapter of their lives, creating cherished memories and forging an unbreakable bond that would carry them through any storm. As for Rachel and Elliot, the consequences of their actions were swift and severe. With the weight of their convictions for child abuse and neglect, they faced not only legal penalties but also the harsh judgment of society. Their reputations were tarnished and their lives forever changed. They were left to grapple with the repercussions of their choices, but amidst the wreckage of their past, there remained a glimmer of hope for redemption. Through therapy and rehabilitation, Rachel and Elliot were allowed to confront their demons and seek forgiveness for the harm they had caused. It was a long and arduous journey, filled with challenges and setbacks, but with time and dedication they began to heal and rebuild their lives. Though the scars of their past would never fully fade, they were determined to make amends and find redemptions for the sake of their son and themselves. Years passed, and Luke blossomed into a remarkable boy, his journey marked by resilience, growth, and an unwavering spirit. Under the nurturing guidance of Grandma Clara, he flourished in his new life, surrounded by a supportive community and the boundless love of his grandmother, who had become his steadfast rock in a world filled with uncertainty. As Luke entered his teenage years, he embraced his newfound sense of independence with grace and maturity. With each passing day, he demonstrated a wisdom beyond his years, a testament to the trials he had overcome and the lessons he had learned along the way. Gone was the timid boy who had once cowered in fear at the sound of raised voices. In his place stood a confident and resilient young man, ready to face the challenges of the world with courage and determination. Luke's experiences had imbued him with a deep sense of empathy and compassion for others. He had witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of neglect and abuse, and he was determined to use his journey to help others find their voice and heal from their pain. In school, Luke excelled academically, his sharp mind and insatiable curiosity earning him the respect and admiration of his peers and teachers alike. But it was not just his intellect that set him apart, it was his unwavering integrity and compassion that truly made him shine. Outside the classroom, Luke dedicated himself to various extracurricular activities and community service projects, eager to make a positive impact on the world around him. Whether volunteering at a local shelter or mentoring younger children, he approached every endeavour with passion and purpose, inspiring those around him to strive for greatness. Despite the challenges he had faced in his past, Luke refused to be defined by his circumstances. Instead, he embraced each new day as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery, determined to forge his path and make a difference in the world. And as Grandma Clara looked upon the young man her grandson had become, her heart swelled with pride and gratitude. Though their journey had been filled with hardship and adversity, it had also been marked by love, resilience, and the unwavering bond between a grandmother and her grandson, a bond that had forever changed the trajectory of their lives. Rachel and Elliot found themselves filled with a profound sense of regret and remorse for the pain they had caused their son. Witnessing Luke's transformation from a timid boy to a confident and resilient teenager served as a stark reminder of the grave mistake they had made. Filled with a newfound sense of humility, Rachel and Elliot made the courageous decision to confront their past and seek forgiveness from Luke and Grandma Clara. With heavy hearts and tears in their eyes, they approached Luke and Clara, their voices trembling with emotion as they attempted to articulate the depth of their remorse. "We are so sorry, Luke," Rachel whispered, her voice choked with emotion as she met her son's gaze. "We never should have let things get to that point. Please forgive us." Elliot nodded in agreement, his eyes filled with tears as he reached out to Luke and Clara. "We were blind to the pain we were causing you," he admitted, his voice thick with regret. "We can never make up for what we've done. But we want you to know that we are truly sorry." Luke's heart swelled with a mixture of emotions as he listened to his parents' heartfelt apologies. Though the wounds of the past were still raw, he found it in his heart to forgive them, recognizing that their journey towards redemption was just beginning. With Grandma Clara's unwavering support, Luke welcomed his parents back into his life, their visits becoming a source of healing and reconciliation for them all. Together they embarked on a journey of forgiveness and healing, determined to rebuild their fractured family bonds and move forward with love and understanding. As Luke's parents, Rachel and Elliot, sought to mend their fractured relationship with their son, they spared no effort in trying to make amends and provide for him in any way they could. Their visits to Luke and Grandma Clara's home became more frequent, each one filled with genuine attempts to reconnect and rebuild the bonds that had been strained by their past mistakes. Determined to show Luke how much they cared, Rachel and Elliot showered him with love and attention, going above and beyond to provide for his needs and make him feel valued and cherished. They arrived with thoughtful gifts and tokens of affection, eager to demonstrate their commitment to being there for him no matter what. "Luke, we bought you some new books and art supplies," Rachel would say, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she presented him with his favourite things. "We know how much you love to read and create. We want to support your passions." Elliot would chime in, his voice filled with warmth and sincerity. "And we've arranged for you to attend that summer camp you've been wanting to go to," he would say, a hint of pride in his tone. "We want you to have every opportunity to pursue your dreams and explore your interests." Luke couldn't help but be touched by his parents' gestures of kindness and generosity. Though their relationship had been strained in the past, he could see that they were making a genuine effort to change and become the parents he had always longed for. With each visit, Luke felt his heart soften toward his parents, the walls he had built around him slowly crumbling away to reveal the love and forgiveness that had always resided within him. And as he embraced Rachel and Elliot in a warm hug, he knew that their journey toward healing and reconciliation was just beginning. As Rachel and Elliot continued their efforts to rebuild their relationship with Luke, they also grappled with the weight of their guilt and shame in the presence of Grandma Clara. Every interaction with her served as a stark reminder of the pain and turmoil they had inflicted upon their family, and they couldn't help but feel a deep sense of embarrassment and remorse. "Clara, we can't begin to express how sorry we are for everything we've put you and Luke through," Rachel would say, her voice trembling with emotion as she met Clara's gaze. "We know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but we hope you can find it in your heart to give us another chance." Elliot would nod in agreement, his eyes filled with tears as he spoke. "We're ashamed of the way we treated you and Luke," he admitted, his voice thick with regret. "We want to make things right and earn back your trust." Clara listened to their heartfelt apologies with a mixture of compassion and resolve. Though she had endured much pain and suffering at their hands, she also recognized the sincerity of their remorse and their genuine desire to change, and so, after much reflection and soul-searching, she decided to extend her forgiveness to them, once and for all. "Rachel, Elliot, I won't pretend that what happened wasn't painful for all of us," Clara would say, her voice gentle but firm. "But I believe in second chances, and I believe that people can change. Let's focus on moving forward together with love and understanding." With Clara's forgiveness, Rachel and Elliot felt a weight lift off their shoulders, their hearts filled with gratitude and relief. They knew that they had been given a precious gift, one that they would cherish and honour for the rest of their lives. And as they sat together as a family, sharing laughter and tears, they knew that though their journey towards healing and reconciliation would be long and challenging, they would face it together, with love, forgiveness, and a renewed sense of hope for the future.